Anu.
Fanu! Come in. What's up? What's up?
We need to make the project.
What project?
The one that the teacher told us yesterday.
Which one?
Don't you remember? Deals, typicas.
Guys, remember that the analysis poem project is for tomorrow.
Not really. But what is deals and tippy what?
Look, here we have the sheets we need to do the project.
Oh, hi, I didn't see you. Well, first I will explain you what Typicas is. Typicas is a method of analyzing poetry that gives you a formula to work when you are trying to figure out what a poem means. Typicas stands for title, paraphrase, connotation, attitude, shift, and theme. First, you have to look at the title before you even start to read the poem. What could the title mean? Ask you this question to start having in mind what the poem is about. Now you have to paraphrase. What is the literal meaning of the poem? Next, the attitude, the most important part of the analysis. What is the implied meaning of the project? Almost in every poem there's a shift, in tone, subject matter, meaning, etc. Look for that shift and ask yourself why the author did it. Now take another look at the title. Now, what does it mean? Finally, what is the main theme? What statement about life is the poet making? Now I'll explain what is details. Details stands for diction, imagery, details, language, and syntax. This helps to figure out the atmosphere, tone, and theme of the poem. Diction is the choice of words of the author. It includes connotation and denotation. Next, imagery. In what parts of the poem is the author appealing to the senses? After that, look for details. Details give life to the poem and make it easier to picture it. What language is the author using? Colloquial, concrete, formal. And the last part, syntax. Look for varied uses of punctuation, paragraph divisions, sentence length, etc. How does that affect the text? And that's it. You have finished. Before analyzing the poem, who was Maya Angelou? By full name, Margaret Annie Johnson Angelou. She was born in St. Louis, Missouri, on 4 April in 1928 and died the 28th of May in 2014. She was a civil rights activist, author, and poet. She studied in the George Washington High School.
I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings, the first in a series of Angelou's autobiographical works, was a huge success. It describes Angelou's life up to age 16, providing a child's point of view about the confusing world of adults. The book concludes with Angelou having regained her self-esteem and caring for her newborn son, in addition to being a sharp account of an African-American girl's coming of age. This work offers insights into the social and political climate of 1930s. Though Angelou is dedicated to the art of autobiography, a six-volume A Song Flown Up to Heaven was published in 2002. In her 70s, she remains a force in several different fields. Since the early 1980s, she has been Reynolds Professor and Writer in Residence at Wake Forest University. In the year of 2000, she was honored by President Clinton with the National Medal of Arts. In 2002, Hallmark introduced the Maya Angelou Live Mosaic Collection, a series of greeting cards containing her verse.
Hi, I'm gonna talk about the poem Still I Rise. You may write me down in history with your bitter, twisted lies. You may trot me in the very dirt, but still like dust I'll rise. Does my softness upset you? What are you beset with gloom? 'Cause I walk like I've got oil wells pumping in my living room, just like moons and like suns, with the certainty of tide, just like hope springing high, still I rise. The poem talks about a rivalry between two people. The author is the person who doesn't give up in the envy of the other person in the poem. The meaning of the poem may be difficult to catch because of words like beset and gloom. Some keywords that may help to comprehend the meaning of the poem are trot and sassiness, which indicate in the poem the cause of this rivalry. In the phrase, you may trot me in the very dirt, trot means throw. That builds up, you may throw me in the very dirt. And sassiness, that means intelligence, builds up, does my intelligence upset you? Giving as a result the meaning that the rivalry focuses on the envy because one person is smarter than other. As a second observation, we find an analogy in the second paragraph with the phrase I walk like I got oil wells pumping in my living room, indicating is there's no one stopping this person. As a third observation, we find a juxtaposition in the phrase just like moons and like suns, in which moons and suns seem to contrast one another. Attitude. The tone of this poem is audacious, because it shows signs of tearless and daring attitudes during all the poem. Shift. There is a shift on rhyme scheme on the second paragraph. It's the only one of the three that does not end with the word rise. Title. Now that we have analyzed the poem and we take back a look at the title, we can now say it's a proper phrase of a person to say every time he or she beats on adversity. And finally, theme. The poet, in this case Maya Angelou, wants to transmit the message that throughout our life we will face people who want to just going to try to take us down, and we must confront them with no fear and stand up from each down.
Before analyzing the poem, who was Ben Jonson? He was born in 1572 in England. He was a writer, playwright, and poet, best known for his satirical comedies. For many people, he was, next to Shakespeare, the greatest dramatic genius of the English Renaissance. Jonson's first major play was Every Man in His Humour. It was performed by a theatre group called the Lord Chamberlain's Men. William Shakespeare performed the lead role. This play is a model of what is called the comedy of humors, in which each character's action is ruled by a whim or affectation. Jonson gained fame when he wrote Volpone or The Fox in 1606. It was loved not only by the people in London but also by the scholars at the universities of Oxford and Cambridge. The following poem is named On My First Son.
Hi, I'm gonna explain this poem. Farewell, thou child of my right hand and joy. My sin was too much hope of thee, loved boy. 7 years to were lent to me, and I thee pay, excited by thy fate on the just day. Oh, could I lose all father now? For why will man lament the state he should envy? To have so soon scalped worlds and flesh rage, and if no other misery, yet age? Restings of peace, and as say here doth lie, Ben Jonson his best piece of poetry, for whose sake henceforth all his vows be such, as what he loves may never like too much. Boom. In this poem, the poet's word choice is quite nostalgic, and it portrays a clear understanding of what the poem is about, a lost son. Diction. The use of phrases like farewell, thou child, and restings of peace come to be a key in order to understand this piece. The use of adjectives creates a clear understanding of the feelings towards the dead kid, with adjectives like restings of peace and loved boy. Furthermore, the phrase I lose all father now makes the reader comprehend that this is a father-written poem. Now talking about imagery, the only part that appeals to the five senses is to have so soon escaped words and flesh rage, which makes the reader imagine on the context of flesh referring to human and rage referring to death. Now talking about details. The first paragraph of the poem contains all details regarding the death of his son, and I thee pay excited by thy fate. This indicates the sense of sadness and love that remains on his dad's heart. Now talking about language. The language used reflects education, most of it is poetic and connotative. Many words used can be identified as antique, especially belonging to the 1700s as doth, which is an archaic third-person singular of do, used in the past. The language indeed does fit in with the profile of a guy like Ben Jonson. Now talking about syntax. This poem is made up of just 2 paragraphs, counting with only 6 sentences. Sentences that are quite extensive and contain multiple commas, to make brief pauses and to present extra details. The use of these commas enabled the poet to include details regarding the death of his son and his feelings after such event. Jonson also includes letters ending with the same letter in order to create a rhythmic followed by exclamation points to create a dramatic touch.
Okay, now I'm going to analyze Maya Angelou's poem with the Diddles method. We, unaccustomed to courage, exiles from the light, live coiled in shells of loneliness, until love lifts its high holy temple and comes into our sight to liberate us unto life. Love arrives, and its train come ecstasies, old memories of pleasure, ancient histories of pain. Yet, if we are bold, love strikes away the chains of fear from our souls. We are weaned from our timidity. In the flashes of love's light, we dare be brave, and suddenly we see that love costs all we are and will ever be. Yet it is only love which set us free. Analyzing the diction, what we first see is that Angelou didn't use very complicated words. She focused more on giving the message that she intended than rather making aesthetic verses. Even though she had some elevated words like wind or coiled, but the meaning of the sentence remains simple to understand. She did not use much imagery. All she used was in order to describe what she sees or how she pictured something, like a shell of loneliness or chains of fear. It does not reflect much of the meaning of the poem, but rather helps picture the small details. The details she used rely heavily on the description of her emotions and feelings she has as she talks about love coming into her life. The details also reflected some sort of metaphors, like train of ecstasy, love's light, or high holy temple. They are not totally descriptive of the setting or characters, but its manifestation. The language she uses also has a low level of complexity. It's easy to comprehend in general. The necessary romantic language is not so deep in words, but in connotation. Finally, the syntax with which she builds the poem is basically constructed with long sentences and short ideas. Although deep, sentences do not have a flowing rhythm, but they are smooth in sound. That's it. That's the analysis of the poem.
How are you going with the project?
Good.
What are you doing?
Editing.
Oh. How are you going with analysis?
Bro, I'm tired, bro.
Yeah, me too. Navi. Later that night. Time to wrap, bro.
Bro, I haven't finished yet, bro.
Oh, come on, bro.
Okay, give me a beat, bro.
Okay.
Okay. You may write me down in history with your bitter, twisted lies. You may trod me in the very dirt, but I'll still like dust and rags. Does my sassiness upset you where you beset with gloom? Cause I walk like God always, pumping in my living room.